Hi everyone, my name is James Martin, and I'm here to talk about virtual power plant participation models. I work for a company called SwitchDin. We're a Newcastle-based technology startup founded in 2014. We basically develop software and devices that allow distributed energy resources such as solar inverters, batteries, and loads to be brought together and used in virtual power plants or managed as parts of microgrids. So we exist mainly because there's a huge opportunity in Australia with lots and lots of distributed solar systems on the grid, there's big opportunities to sort of optimize the way that these resources are used on the market, network, and household levels. This is some back-of-envelope calculating that we've done. We made a really rough calculator where you can estimate how much battery-based virtual power plant capacity there could be in Australia by 2040. In a very optimistic scenario, so this is all back-of-envelope again, could end up with about 11 gigawatts, which would be huge. But even in a business-as-usual scenario, could end up meeting somewhere along the lines of 1.7% of peak operational demand on the national electricity market through battery-based virtual power plants in 2 decades' time. So what that means is that a lot of people, if they're actually participating in a virtual power plant, will have their devices managed by someone up in the cloud. When most people think of virtual power plants, they think of inverters. That's what that weird looking gray thing is on the side, and batteries, right? Really what these need in order to be incorporated into a virtual power plant is some sort of visibility into the data, ideally present and future, and also a means to control them. But there's a lot more than that. You've also got loads, such as air conditioners, electric vehicles, water heaters, if you can believe that's what that is, and people suing away from you. I mean, pool pumps that are maybe built to the Australian standard for demand response. These are all, or can all be, along with solar and batteries, demand response enabled devices, which means that they can be controlled from somewhere to optimize performance on the grid. This is a screenshot from SwitchDin's own virtual power plant management platform. It's a very simple one. This is just sort of showing manual actions, but it gives you an idea of how these resources would kind of be visualized for dispatch. So the little green bars are different assets. Each of these would have a merit order. Like batteries would be the first thing that you'd access, but you might also turn down somebody's air conditioner to varying degrees depending on the severity and the agreement that the aggregator has with those households. But it could be anything. Could be a PV inverter as well in cases where demand actually needs to be increased for network purposes, for example. The red line at the top was the target. So in that case, it was for a network who wanted to keep the local transformers usage within certain bounds. And it was doing that by managing the assets downstream of that transformer. Another one here. So when we talk about devices, we can also talk about the controller types. So this is really the approach. How do you build a controller into a system? You can either have an external controller, which is that little game controller there, linked into the cloud, that sits alongside a battery or an inverter on the wall or in the meter box, and send signals up to the cloud management platform. Or you could take a similar approach and have that hardware, software embedded into a device on its own. So one of our partners, Iguana Technologies, out there, have one of our little droplet devices inside. If you look inside the battery, you can check it out later. Another approach that is theoretically possible is this cloud-based approach where you have a cloud management platform that taps into the cloud platforms of other inverters or say batteries or other things like that. So you're talking cloud to cloud. SwitchDin's approach is basically those first two. So next we'll talk about the different things that you can do with a virtual power plant, the virtual power plant services. So of course there's wholesale energy trading, where prices go up, prices go down. If you're a retailer or an aggregator, you can take advantage of those fluctuations and ideally pass those benefits on to your customers. There are other services in the pipeline like FCAS and distributed energy or virtual power plants being used to do black start, but these are very, very early stages, although AEMO and others are working on it. Virtual power plant services, another one is distribution networks. So distribution networks are deploying virtual power plants, and to clarify, we're using a virtual power plant fairly broadly, the term virtual power plant fairly broadly, because we're talking about its use not only in energy markets but also in networks and incorporating not just generation of batteries but also loads. So a lot of networks, including a couple that we're working with, which include Horizon Power and Energy Queensland, are using distributed assets to alleviate local congestion or congestion on their local networks, to prevent reverse power flows to their local transformers, things like that. So what will the programs themselves look like? There are a few programs out there. I imagine you're probably aware of some of them, but there are a few different. This is a breakdown of a few of the different models that are out now. So one is a situation where you've got vendor lock-in. So you buy a battery and you can participate in a virtual power plant program with that battery manufacturer or just like one partner that they might have. Right? Another is where you purchase a system with an electricity retailer or a network or something. So it's an electricity company lock-in. Usually, and I'll talk about this more later, they'll give you some sort of a discount on it, and then they get access to use your system from time to time. So you benefit from having a cheap solar and battery system, for example, or a cheap battery. Right. And another, which we're hoping to see more of going forward, is really more like a public standard or something where there's just a way that a lot of aggregators, networks, retailers, and integrated utilities know that they can connect to if a device is built to it. So they can tap into these devices through this common platform without really having to worry about who it's compatible with or which retailers it's compatible with. How do end users benefit? We see a few different models out there. One is this idea of giving a really big upfront incentive. In the Horizon Power project that we work on, people can buy a solar and battery system for $5,000 in this. It's a pilot, but that's a big improvement on $20,000 to $30,000. And then the network has an agreed upon number of times that they can dispatch these units over their lifetime, right? So they get to use them every once in a while. That's part of the agreement. Another is an ongoing flat payment. So I buy my own solar and batteries, and then I sign up with a retailer, for example, and I get paid quarterly a flat amount, and we have an agreement that they can use my battery or my, air conditioner, for example, if that's the other way that they do it, a few times a year to serve their own needs, without, ideally, inconveniencing me too much. And the last one is payments for one-off services. So this is generally when you bring your own battery storage system, or buy an air conditioner and get it, make sure that it's DRED enabled or demand response enabled, and you allow the network or aggregator or retailer or whoever it is to use that once in a while, and they pay you for it. Or there could be a combination of all of the above in the future when these sorts of values are all stacked together. There's these subsidies and incentives might come from different places. They could come from government, like in South Australia, or they could come from a network. They could come from a retailer. Or there's the other model, which is basically just like a rent-a-roof type scheme, or rent-a-wall in the case of a battery, where someone owns your system and you benefit by having discounted electricity prices. This is how they're doing it in South Australia with the virtual power plant on public housing. This is a quick example of a very rough example of battery payback in South Australia under the home battery scheme. So batteries are very expensive at the moment. Here's a modestly sized 6 kilowatt hour battery, part of a hybrid system. If you want to know more about the numbers, you can email me. My email address is going to be up there, but I've thought it through. Let's say it's part of a hybrid system. You've got a hybrid inverter that manages both the solar and the batteries, and the system meets the South Australian home battery scheme requirements, and we'll say I said roughly this battery on its own, not including the solar, could cost about $6,700 fully installed. Let's say the home battery scheme gets that down to about $3,700. That battery is still going to have a payback period of about 13.2 years. And the warranty period on a typical battery is about 10 years, right? Most lithium batteries. These are just some figures I put in there to see what it might look like if you had virtual power plant services to put on top of that. Say $100 a year, that's going to bring the payback period for that battery system down to just under 10 years. If you managed to get $200 a year through various stacks, you might be able to bring that down to just under 8. We're still pretty early on in all this stuff, and these are not fantastic numbers for people looking to get a battery, but they will continue to get better as prices fall, and there are also lots of programs out there that incentivize the cost front of batteries in the meantime. In addition to the South Australia scheme, but there's other ones out there. Crunch the numbers for yourself. This is kind of a roundup of the things I've touched on. If you want to go to our website, sign up for our newsletter. I'll be putting this out, making it available afterwards as well. And I just wanted to end by saying that I'm really happy to be active in the space. There's lots of cool stuff happening in Australia, and we should all be proud. Thank you.